That's a pet peeve of mine. And if you've
Ah,
heard me talk, if you've heard me put a blog post out there or whatever it is, I will answer you, unless, of course, you've been a jerk to me for a while, and then I probably will just delete you. And, I've got one person that I just now automatically, their stuff just goes to my junk folder. I've actually put them on just move it to junk. I'm not even going to answer you. Um, I am, I get if you're trying to submit something to one of the big five and you're just sort of in their slush pile, that approach of, hey, if you don't hear from us, it means that we passed. I think that that's personally wrong. Okay. And I'm going to give
oh,
you also a good personal experience on this one here. There was a block of time that my email server, for whatever reason, emails were not coming in.
mm,
There was something wrong. And it was actually connected to the way Gmail had adjusted something on their end. Gmail made a shift of some sort of a thing with their programming. So my email server wasn't picking it up. And then one day I literally went in and opened up the email and was like, why am I getting an email from this person? I've answered her, end of story. And then I looked and realized that that email was sent 11 months earlier. So when I contacted my email server, I said, hey, what's going on? They said, let me go see if we can fix this code. Um, so we'll see what we can do. They must have fixed it in 10 minutes because 10 minutes later, my emails just went bam, 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 and just filled up. So I answered all of those people. I still went back because look, how many times does somebody, even your best friend, that email ends up in a junk pile? First, for your computer that day decided not to have coffee and it just didn't want to work with you, right? So that's why I always answer. That's just their personality. What I always look at is if they say they haven't heard from, we'll make a decision in 3 months. I'm going to put on my calendar 3 months later. I'm going to email them back and go, hi, just reaching out, wanted to make sure that my email actually made it to you. Hopefully it didn't just get lost in a junk folder. One of my emails I sent out to an editor got shifted to his junk folder. And he goes, I just found it in the junk folder. I don't know what happened. I was like, not a problem. So I reach out and ask him. Um,
so do you
yeah,
think if they don't say like 3 months or give you a time, do you think 3 months is a good time to?
I think 3 months is fine, at least for the partial. I might go, yeah, maybe 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
depending on
thank
how
you.
big the publisher site is too.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. Like I said, I really get irritated when that happens. So nothing. Okay. So Maggie, what do you want to do? Do you want to do a 5 minute and then come back and take a look at the romance and women's fiction?
Um, that's what we normally do, yes.
Okay, cool. That way I'll go get a refill of my coffee here and
I guess it's 5 minutes. Everybody back?
looks like almost everybody's there. Yeah, almost every. I'll slowly phase into this one. There we go. I love this workshop, honestly, because I especially love taking this workshop to general fiction conferences. And because this one's really kind of a lot of fun because we get a lot of, and this is going to be so gender specific, but I always get all these guys who think that they've written a romance novel. And and it's great because I'm not saying guys can't write a romance novel. There's a lot of guys who write some amazing romance novels out there. Um, but you get these, and yes, overly generic, stereotypical. I get what I'm doing, hasty generalization, fallacy, argument all over the place. But these are these gruff guys coming in probably spend, their time on the History Channel researching World War II bombers, that type of thing. I've written a romance novel. I was like, awesome. Tell me about it. And they start talking, and it is so clear that there's no romance in it. There might be a relationship, somebody might have gotten married. And I always turn around, I've always got a bag of romance novels next to me. And I pick up the book and I go, does your book look like this? And they went, oh God, no. I went, then you're not writing romance. Because that's always a dead giveaway. But I think this case right here, when we're talking about romance and women's fiction, when I early on in the agency, I realized that I had to define women's fiction. Nobody was defining it out there. There was not a definition of women's fiction. Some of the editors were going, well, women's fiction is going to be a story about older women. It's still a romance, but then they're going to go, it's older women, so therefore we're going to call it women's fiction. I'm like, no, that's not it, right? I mean, so I had to kind of define what women's fiction was and to separate the two. And I think, honestly, what I'm going to tell you, if you just go right back to the basics here, you're going to realize that there is a clear, distinct difference between the two. Okay. And it really all comes down to what the plot is more than anything else. So obviously you need to know, I'm going to move you back up to the small screens there. You need to know what your genre is before you submit to me. Okay. Before you submit to anybody. Is this truthfully a romantic suspense, or is it a suspense novel? Is it, if you don't know that genre, you're going to send it to the wrong people. Okay. And that really is the biggest problem that we get. I'll have people who go, hi, I have a romance here, and it's not a romance. Now that's one of those red flags to me. It's not that I can't turn around and go, hey, I love the storyline, but I think we're going to market it this way versus this. It's a red flag that says you don't even know what your genre is. So if you don't know it, you're not going to be able to write it. And obviously, you want to kind of talk about those myths and understand kind of the difference between romance and women's fiction. That's kind of where we're heading to here. So here's part of the reason we think about this. And I think since somebody had said that, you'd said, a lot of us are indie publishers and, indie published, or you're self-publishing or whatever that might be, it's still about product placement. Okay. And I love this comment right here that it was positioning as everything in publishing, where you are going to put your book. Even if it's a digital one, you have to know which button to click for Amazon that says, I want it to be on this digital bookshelf. Okay. So, if you're sitting here and Sarah is saying, I want a book to read and I want a mystery book, she's going to type in on that Kindle list on the side or in the book list, she's going to click mysteries. That's what she's looking for. And if your book is paranormal, but not mystery, she doesn't want, even if it's a paranormal with some mystery elements, she knows in her head, she wants mystery. Does that make some sense? So that's what the readers are going to. And again, if you don't know where you're sending it to, a lot of times that's why we're going to end up rejecting those stories. I love this map. They got rid of it. This one, I want to say, came out of Penguin. I think Penguin put it out once before. The original version of this one was actually like this map. You can't find it out there. So I'm just going to tell you, I've looked for this one again, but it was actually a map of it looked like a country map that you might see, like you're playing Risk, something like that they had all these different regions and everything. And you click on that and it would show you what the differences are. But I think obviously take a look at just the thrillers section alone, right? Thrillers, we have all these different types of thrillers. There's 10 potential different approaches that we can take with a thriller. So So when you're trying to decide who to send that to, you have to know what type of thriller you're sending, right? Is this a historical thriller versus a legal thriller? The voice, the twist is going to change to it, right? We got the mysteries right here. We got, is it a cozy mystery versus a police procedural mystery book? Obviously, different approaches to things. So when you're thinking about the books of where you want to send these to, always think that knowing that niche is going to aim you in a certain way. The other thing to always think about is if you know that niche, people who read that type of book are expecting a certain thing. Okay, so when somebody goes and says, I'm gonna go down here to my romance section and I want a romance, those people know exactly what they're looking for. They want that happily ever after. That's what they're looking for in their story. They don't want any of the extra garbage. That's what they're looking for. Now, they can have a romantic suspense, but they're in it to get the romance feel to it. The people going to the mystery are there to get the mystery feel to it. That's what they want. They want that detective type of a story. So you've got to kind of figure that piece out. That's kind of that rationale. Okay. Obviously, here comes the big problems with submissions. Submitting to the wrong person. We kind of talked about this with the agent one, right? You're submitting a project to the wrong person with a wrong voice. You're submitting a project to somebody who doesn't even represent that one. I actually rejected 4 people this morning who weren't even writing romance and women's fiction. And I'm like, hey, sorry, this is not what I represent. Now, this is the irritating part, is that I will often get 3-4 times a year somebody who writes back and goes, well, if you weren't so close-minded. I'm like, no, that's my business model. My business model says this is what I represent. And what I often tell people is, if you really think that that's the case, if you sell lingerie, I want you to go to a Home Depot, to one of those big box hardware stores and ask them to sell your lingerie. And when they say no, you tell them they need to change their marketing plan because they're being closed-minded. And they're going to go, well, that wouldn't work. And I'm like, you're right. Think about what you just did. So you mislabel the project because you don't know what it is. Believing just because your story is good, we're going to change that marketing plan. There we go. But you're also showing us that you just don't understand something. So that's kind of that immaturity level. So you do need to know that genre. I always tell people also, when you are categorizing your writing, people go, I don't want to be in a niche. I don't want to be put into a niche for any reason. But if you think about all of these basic ideas, for a column to be considered Doric or Corinthian or Ionic, it has to meet certain pieces of criteria. Same thing with a romance, same thing with women's fiction, same thing with music, same thing with art. You got to put it into that niche. So when we go back to that earlier slide, that one, for something to fall under a legal thriller piece, it's got to click off certain criteria to be fitting in there. And it's like, well, if it's missing something, does that mean that it's not that? No, it means that it's a legal thriller that's missing something. So you can't just kind of go, well, I'm going to put it someplace else instead. Here we go. Common myths about romance and women's fiction. A lot of people, well, I have romance in my story. Okay. I was really thinking about this morning when I got up and was putting the slides together. That there's a lot of books out there that are being marketed as romance that are probably more women's fiction right now. Okay. More than anything else. That there's a relationship in the story, that there's a romantic setting. That's the one that the guys always like to use. It's set in Venice. Venice is a romantic city. Yeah, certain times of the year. I've been in there in the winter and you're walking around in 3 feet of water that came off of the Adriatic. That's not exactly the most attractive place ever. The characters have sex, so therefore it's a romance. And a lot of people will go, oh, well, my characters don't have sex, so therefore it's a women's fiction. Now, That doesn't do it. So, women's fiction, my character's female. Nope. It's written about women. That doesn't make it women's fiction. Well, I don't have a happily ever after, so therefore it's women's fiction. Nope. No sex. It's written by a woman. All of those common flaws. Okay. So here we go. Let's talk about really what a romance is. Okay. And what I want you to be thinking about here, it's the Freytag model. I think it's Freitag. It's the one that you learn in junior high and high school. It's the short story plot diagram, the little pyramid one, right? That's what I want you to go back to. In a romance story, the main central arc is about the relationship. Simple as that. That is your plot line. Okay? It's your whole focus is about that arc, that there is a happily ever after. Okay? We've got to get to that happily ever after. Now, the focus is primarily going to be from a female perspective. That's sort of changing now in some cases when you have LGBTQ stories. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be around that female perspective. 9 times out of 10. But with the LGBTQ stories, it can be that's a slight difference. It's about human nature, and yes, there can be those subgenres. So we can have a historical romance, we can have a romantic suspense, we can have a paranormal romance. But it's all about that central story arc. So if you were pitching that story to me, okay, you'd be pitching that story of saying that everything you talked about would be about that relationship of how they're building from nothing to something. Okay, that's the whole storyline right there. If we look at women's fiction, however, and this is the one where I kind of define this one on my own, I say women's fiction focuses more on the female journey. Oh, Maggie's cat's in here now. There we go. It's okay. It's fine. If my dog was doing that, that would be, he'd be big. So it's focused on the female journey. That's what this focus is about. Okay. Most of the time, it is from a female point of view because we're looking at the world through a female lens. Okay. And that's the easiest way to describe that is that you put on, doesn't matter who it is who's reading the story, you put on the glasses, and now I'm seeing the world through what women are generally going to see the world as. Okay, so this is why I'm going to categorize Philippa Gregory's historicals as women's fiction. Because we're seeing what the world of the male-dominated Tudor world looked like through the female lens, what they saw, how they saw the world. Okay, how they processed information. It's a chance for us to understand what it is to be a woman, what they're going through, what it is to be female. Doesn't have to have a happily ever after. So now, just because it doesn't have that doesn't mean that it can't be women's fiction. Okay, so you can have that happily ever after, but it's what you're focusing on. There may or may not be romance or sex in the story. But readers should leave with a sense of learning something. We've learned something out of the book. What's the big takeaway? Okay, so if I read a piece of women's fiction, it's what did I determine more than anything else. Now, when I'd said a lot of times some of the stories that are being marketed as romances, I would say fall into the category of more women's fiction. And honestly, I would probably throw some of like the Emily Harris novels, I would probably put as more of women's fiction. Because the main female character has faced a struggle with her life and she is moving forward. Okay, I got a chat here. Let me go pull this up. Oh, perfect. I love that idea there, Trisha. So yeah, if you didn't read that, that's definitely something to take a look at there. But the focus is really on her trying to manage her life and figure out where the heck she's going to. And yeah, there happens to be the hockey guy that's in there. Great, the hockey guy's in there. But the focus is not about her and the hockey guy trying to figure out their life together. It's more about her figuring out her world, and that guy just happens to be part of it, if that makes sense. But again, it should be this sense that I have learned something from this. The book I always like to use as a great example, and I'm stressing book here, not movie, okay, is Under the Tuscan Sun. Okay. Now, the book Under the Tuscan Sun is nonfiction, but you can kind of read it and get if it was a fictional book, you would understand what we mean by that. That Frances Mays is trying to figure out what life is like and where she fits in the world and how the world functions around her through the building of that house and through the construction process. And she's learning about people in general through the construction of that house. Okay. And like I said, I have to stress it's the book. Movie's okay, but the movie is nothing like the book. The movie is completely fictional compared to what the book is. If you've ever read the book and watched the movie, you go, that's not what happened. She doesn't find a guy. She's married to that guy. That guy is with her through the whole process. Because I love following her husband in that story because he learns coffee. He just loves the process of making coffee and understanding the value of coffee because we're looking at what she learns. That coffee is not just something that's to be drunk, it's something to experience, right? So if you think about that approach, that's what women's fiction is. And again, what's that central story arc? What are we really focused on? Does that help a little bit? I want to leave that one open for questions really quickly here. So if anybody's got some thoughts you want to throw out or ask some questions, this would be a great time to do that before I go on. Or maybe I'm just rocking it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
About, it seems like there's a lot of books, on Amazon that they just call themselves romance. They call themselves women fiction. They call themselves all this, and you look at the book and, you've read it. It's not a romance, but they're categorized. Is that just for marketing or?
Yeah. Well, it depends. Okay. If it's coming from if it's coming from a traditional publisher, that's not going to be a marketing issue.
A lot of them are doing it though.
But they're putting it and they're probably labeling it as they're putting it into a category that fits more like, so I'm going to use like type of approach, right? That it's a romantic comedy more than anything else. Is it really, is the whole central storyline around it? I doubt that. But I think for all of you, the more you can be focused that way, yeah, I would do that. Is it for marketing purposes? Some cases, yes. In other cases, and a lot of the other cases, it's because the person didn't know what they were publishing.
Mm.
Right? You've got to figure out where are you going to put it on the bookshelf. That's always the big thing. Which bookshelf are you going to put it on? Because remember, Sarah's only going to go to that mystery category. She's only going to that mystery bookshelf. She's not going anywhere else, right? So if you've got a women's fiction, and it has a mystery to it, she's not going to go find it someplace else. She's only going, she's only going to that mystery shelf. So I guess that's, yeah.
So I just took a quick look at Amazon's initial categories. When you first go to, like, if you're first going in to look, romance is a category, but women's fiction is not.
Right?
So they might have a different way of, like, you might
That-
have to
yeah.
look harder for women's fiction.
Correct. So yeah, but obviously, if you're trying to figure out what type of story yours is, you know, of how you want to market it, that's what you're going to focus on, right? You know, yeah, that's what you're going to focus on. So, one of the books, well, the book that I told you about where that woman walked into the room just dressed perfectly and professional. Her book was called Endangered. Okay. And the premise of the book, her son, she's a single mom, son's 16, 15, 16, if I remember it, somewhere in that area. They're living in the projects of Philadelphia, and the son is in the wrong place at the wrong time and is thrown into the juvenile justice system. And it's her through trying to get him out of jail, understanding her role as a female in this world of how whether she's going to be taken seriously or not, but it's also a racism issue. There's this wonderful scene in there where she's yelling at the guy who, by the way, she ends up with a happily ever romance with. She starts yelling at him, telling him he's completely racist, and he turns around and right back at her and yet you're calling me all of these things. That's the same that, you know, you're racist too. And you just read that and you go, ugh. But she had to learn that piece of the puzzle, right? So is it a crime novel? Yeah, it's kind of a legal thriller, more than a legal thriller. But the main emphasis of that story is her understanding the justice system, her understanding the weaknesses in the justice system, her understanding her role in the world of how people view her and how she views other people. That puts it into a women's fiction category. If that helps a little bit there. So obviously, how do you figure out what your story is? Again, it's that central story arc that you're shooting for. Okay. It's what you talk about the most. Okay. And this is when I go to a conference and somebody comes in and they sit down and go, "Hi, Scott. It's good to see you. I'm so excited. I'm going to do this as best visual as I can here, right? It's like, hi, how are you? My name's Scott. I'm here to pitch to you. I'm so excited about my book. Great. What do you have?" And they open it up and they start to read. They're reading their pitch. And I'll often say, "Hey, can I just see that?" And they'll hand it to me because now they think that they don't have to pitch the story. And I'll take it from it and I'll lay it down. I said, "Now tell me about your story." And they bumble and go, "Oh, what do I do? What do I do?" And I'm like, "Just talk to me about your story." Because what you tell me about your story, that'll be the story arc. So I had a woman who came in, she goes, "Hi, I've got this story. Everybody keeps saying it's inspirational, but it's not inspirational. It's really a romance. It's romance. It's a romance. It's not an inspirational. It's not inspirational." And I said, "Okay, well, listen, just tell me about the story." She could not talk about anything other than the inspirational plot once I took it away from her. And I went, "Did you hear everything you talked about?" And she goes, "Well, yeah, I mean, you know, there were these prayers and how she went back to her Bible and she looked at her Bible and was like, do you hear what you're just saying? You told me it's not this, and yet your central story arc focused on that." And she just looked at me and she goes, "I guess you're right." And I went, "Okay, you know, I mean, that was it, right?" Because she had convinced herself of what she wanted it to be. Okay. And that's why we're saying you can't force your story to be something else. right? A lot of people will sit there and go, I want to write a women's fiction novel, or I want to write a mystery or whatever it is, and they're determined to write that. But what's really coming out of their brain and onto that paper or onto that computer screen is what their brain really wanted to write. And that's the central story arc more than anything else. Okay. So, like I said, what you're going to do, what your story is, right? Think about when you're writing that blurb about your book. Think about when you're writing that query letter and you're writing it to me. Okay. And you know that I'm big into, so we'll say you want to pitch your women's fiction story. You're going to write that pitch using all the verbiage that I have of trying to focus only on the central storyline. You just crafted something that your story's not. You changed your story around to kind of fit my needs. But when I read your story is this, not this. Does that make some sense? So that's what we see when we're you'll send me this pitch and I'm going to go, ooh, that sounds like a great story idea. I got one that I just read this morning that honestly, it looks amazing. I don't think it's what this person thinks that they've written. I think that they have written a completely different type of a story. But what they pitched to me used the verbiage of what I was looking for. So we'll have to see that. Okay. Does that help a little? Like I told you, this one's a nice, simple, easy one here. It all comes back down to what that central storyline is. I'm going to do I'll leave this open here, and if we didn't want to go back to any other slides.
So I have a question. It sounds like women's fiction can have a strong romantic element or not. It doesn't.
Yeah. No, it can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
I'm
are there
just trying to
different-
think. I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head here. You could probably put Outlander as a women's fiction.
Really?
Because the central storyline's not really about Jamie and Claire, although it is. It's more focused on Claire navigating this world and seeing that world through her eyes. Does that make some sense?
So
It's
it's
kind
just-
of, that one's kind of a weird one, right? And that's why I'm kind of going, if I had to throw one out there, I would probably, just off the top of my head, you could probably argue it as such, just because it was so groundbreaking when it came out, right? I mean, Outlander was like so over the top, just different, and that's why it sold so well, right? I mean, everybody couldn't get their hands on that book fast enough. They couldn't put it down to read it. We actually had a friend of ours who, Jennifer's kids had to hide the book from her because she would forget to cook dinner. Literally. And they just she'd go, where's my book? I'm just like, Mom, we need some help with our homework. Can you put Jamie and Claire to bed, right? Because it was that addicting, right? Especially when Outlander first came out, right? So, but I think if you looked at it that way, that's what I would be doing. I probably would. I will argue to my death on this one here. I don't believe that Nicholas Sparks is women's fiction.
Is he claiming it is?
A lot of times he will, yeah.
I thought he was writing romance.
Well, if it's romance, then why is it everybody's dead at the end of a Nicholas Sparks book, right?
It's true.
It's just like, great, we got this romance. Now we're going to off the character. Great. Guess what? That's not really a happily ever after. Like, I don't ever see anybody walking out of a Nicholas Sparks movie going, that was so happy. Like, no, you just walked out with Kleenex boxes in your hand, right? Empty ones. But the focus is not really about the female journey. I just put it as a fiction novel that happened to have a strong character, or maybe there was a romance to it. But I wouldn't put it as a women's fiction because it's not focused on what that female journey and what that female lens is about. I don't care if women like to read it. That doesn't make it a women's fiction. So, yeah, if that helps. I mean, I guess that's, I'm going to do a stop share here. I'd rather see people's faces here.
So I'm getting back to the marketing. I mean,
Yep.
so readers out there that are looking for women's fiction with strong romance. I mean, how do you market that? Or
Right. So I, like I said, I think you could sit there and argue that this is a fantastic story about how a woman is coming to grips with getting stuck in a foreign country for a long period because of visa problems or whatever it is, and she's stuck in a foreign country. But during that journey, boy, she just meets this guy who just makes her world. But the real struggle is her adapting to this new country and the new culture and the new world around her. Right? It's what you put at the beginning part of your pitch. Right? What's your thesis statement, basically? You tell me what your thesis is, we're off and running.
that the log line or longer than that, or
Well, and I wouldn't even, I mean, a log line is really more for like screenplays and films and things like that. It's more of, like I said, what is it that you're going to talk about at the very beginning? So if you said, Dear Scott, I've got this fantastic book called Alien Vampire Bunnies, and it's a 70,000 word women's fiction story about a female who's coming to grips with being stuck in a different country, dealing with a new culture of people, or in this case, rabbits around her. Right. So it's what is it that you're focused on, right? I'm focused on that. Or if this is a story about the baker. So, Dear Scott, I'm pitching to you, it's a contemporary romance called The Baker and the Cowboy, about how two people from completely different backgrounds figure out how to make bundt cake while riding a horse. Yeah, I'm coming up with these ideas off the top of my head. Now, Alien Vampire Bunnies has been around for a long time, but you see what I'm saying is that's the focus, right? That it's these two coming together, right? You take the contemporary, right? She's brand new to town. He's the single dad next door, and they're figuring out how they can live that independent life and break away from saying we don't want things together, to have a relationship and have a romance together and be able to, and the kid is the one that brings them all together. See, now I'm focused on the romance piece. That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Literally, it's go back to what you would talk about the most.
I guess as a reader, I'm looking for books of different genres with romance in them, but if it's just all the romance, then I don't know.
But you know something, yeah. But the thing is, that goes back to that chart that we had, right?
Mhm.
You're still you need to read the books that you write. Okay. And even if you say I write romance, you write a specific type of romance. right?
Mhm.
If do you write contemporary romance? Do you write historical romance? Do you write romantic suspense, right? That's what you want to read, because each of those genres also has a unique style, tone, and voice to them, that when readers pick up that book, they're expecting that. So if you are reading a Regency romance, those characters have certain tropes and things that the readers are expecting to see in those books,
Mhm.
right? If you're writing a Scottish romance, it isn't just the fact that the guy's walking around in a kilt and says "donna" a lot, right? That's not the thing that makes it a historical romance set in Scotland, right? It just, I mean, just because the guy says that doesn't mean that, right? So if you're trying to read all these different types of things and trying to blend it all together, you're confusing yourself. Okay.
Mhm.
Because, good old Sarah, back over to Sarah and her mysteries, right? Sarah doesn't want a mystery, if she wants a mystery romance, then she's expecting all those mystery elements, but the romance is the key thing that's focused on, and the mystery just happens to be happening around that romance.
Mhm.
That's the setting that she's placed it in.
Mm.
Does that help?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. I guess for me, when it comes to when I start separating these two, it just seems really obvious to me, because I think about it that way, and I think about just that central plot, and I want it to be that simple for you. I want you, when you are thinking about your plot, literally just keep it to that simple. Don't try to overly complicate things. Okay. Um, and if you're kind of going, it can't be that easy, it's that easy, right? So I want you to kind of keep it that simple for yourself. But I think for me, the hardest part of anything was trying to figure out, how do I define that women's fiction? How do I put a name to it? Right? And I can't just say it's got a female protagonist. I've got to kind of, because there's lots of books out there that have a female protagonist. That doesn't mean that they're all women's fiction. Well, it's fake, and there's a main character who's a female. Yes, so who cares, right? That's not the central story arc.
So can,
Go ahead.
sorry. Can women's fiction have the female and the male point of view with a female protagonist? Or is it all female point of view?
I think that they can. Yeah, I think that they can. I don't see any problem with that one. But I guess what I would caution you about, and this is now what I'm starting to see people doing, the big phrase is, this is a dual POV story. And it's like, it's not really a dual POV story. It's just that instead of using the ... and putting the same central concept that you wanted to be done in chapter 1, you just separated the two. This story is now being told from Steve's point of view. That's like a dual point of view story, is that it's parallel stories that are going. But somehow those parallel stories have got some commonality that's happening with them. Does that make some sense? So I mean, you can, obviously I'm going to have a point of view of a guy that's in there, but the bigger emphasis for women's fiction is, what are we learning about the whole concept? And I guess, can you have a guy included in there and we get his point of view? Yes, I think you can. I'm not going to say no to it, but the major emphasis needs to be from that other lens. Like, what are we learning from this? And it might be we're just seeing his reaction to those things. because I think that that could really work well. Of she sees things one way and then we see his point of view and you can go, whoa, wait a minute here. That's not really what we were looking at in the story. Wow, he's really got a completely different twist to this whole thing. I'm not sure if he's seeing the world that way. I think it would be really difficult to write though.
I have a question for you, Scott.
Yep.
Are you seeing a lot of stories with multiple time frames? For example, I think it's quite popular now where there's one book, but we're talking about maybe the contemporary time. Then it's the next chapter, we're going back to 1912. And now
Yes.
here we are contemporary. Oh, now we're late 1912. How do you feel about those kinds of stories? And are you seeing a lot of those being submitted?
I see people attempting to do those. And the problem is that we have two completely disconnected storylines. I really think that they come, I mean, because I to write a story like that takes a lot of skill. And a lot of times what happens is, so this is the common one we see, right? Sarah's mom has died. She's now in Sarah's house. I'm picking Sarah. I don't know why I'm picking on Sarah here today, but so we're in. Sarah's gone back and she finds the box that's in the closet with all the letters. Oh, see where we're. I mean, as soon as you see that, go again, right? And now we shift back. Now we see what mom's life was like then. Who gives a rip? Right? What we should be learning is something from seeing those stories in the past. So if we're going to do that as a women's fiction, I got to see the contemporary line going one way and her discovering things about herself. And then she reads something from the past and she brings that back into her own life. And she goes, dude, I'm doing the same thing. I can't do that. And we see a shift in her storyline. A lot of times we don't see that happening. Okay. We just see historical line, contemporary line, and nobody's learning anything from it. Obviously, the historical people can't learn anything from the contemporary side. We get that, right? But the contemporary person should be going, whoa, I just read this about grandma. Whoa, that now I understand why we do things in the kitchen this way. I don't like this. No wonder I don't like this, you know. And then we see that person shift, change, grow, and do something different. People try it, it never works. I haven't seen it working yet.
You haven't seen it work well yet?
Yep.
Wow.
Because I think people they think what they're doing is, I'm learning so much about myself by reading grandma's letters, but we don't see that learning taking place in that contemporary world. And we don't see what's happening in that historical world of the why piece of it. We don't really
I
see that other
understand.
than.
I think it's a
Yeah.
hard thing to do.
I do. I think it's a
Yeah.
lot harder than people think. So it's also kind of why I think people fail horribly with writing first person. Because writing first person is really difficult because you can't show me what the world is like around you because you're not going to talk about certain things. Right? When I talk about this, I often say, when you walk into your house, do you sit there and you go, I walked into the house and looked at the china cabinet. I remembered all the stories about grandma and the china that she'd put out. You don't think about that. You think about kicking your shoes off, taking the groceries into the kitchen and laying them on the counter. Right? You don't give us the world building. You don't describe the world around you in first person. Do it in third person. The narrator has the ability to do that now for the person. So oftentimes first person is just a lot of telling than anything else. So that's kind of one of those examples right there, I guess. So Does that help, Gloria? Okay, cool.
I'm just curious, what would you categorize Where the Crawdads Sing? Would that be women's fiction? Because I've seen it. I think once I went on Amazon and was looking for like the 100 best romance,
Yeah.
and they have it as like #1 romance. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I wouldn't no, I wouldn't, yeah, I would not put it under romance. Yes, I would. It's been a while since I actually really read that one seriously. Maybe as a women's fiction, but I'd probably put it more in that suspense type of, you know what I mean? More in that mystery and the suspense and that side of the story. If I had to put it any place, if I had to pick which box am I gonna put it in, I'd probably go over in that direction than anything else.
Not women's fiction then.
I could see why somebody would put it over there, and I'd probably go, if I had a backup plan, I'd probably go, okay, put it over in women's fiction. But I'm not I'm not really sure if the focus is strong enough there, but I think it's strong enough, like majority wise, to probably slide it in there. If I had a 75, 80, or whatever percentage, I'd probably go, yeah, there's enough that I could probably put it over there. It's kind of like the Diana Gabaldon one, right? If I had to put a percentage of something, that's probably why I'd probably go, yeah, I could probably squeeze it over there.
Okay, thanks.
So I've learned how little I know because I've done pitches at conferences and I've walked in with a piece of paper. Everybody else walks in with a piece of paper, but obviously that's wrong. So you can write the best book in the world, but if you don't present yourself or if you don't submit correctly to Scott or whoever, you're not gonna get past first base.
Correct. Right. Because think about this. If you go into a job interview, you could be the best candidate ever. You could be the best thing since sliced bread walking in there. You can be everything you want. But in a job interview situation, they are looking to see, do you fit as part of our team? Right? In a job interview, it's how well you fit into our established country or company, not country, but company. Do you fit that mold? Right? So yeah, you could pitch it the wrong way. You could come across in the wrong way. But yeah, if you also pitch that story in a way that it's not, that leads you straight to that rejection because you're trying to convince me that your book is something that it isn't.
Right. Because when we're pitching to editors and agents, the question comes up, can you tell us why we need an agent? I mean, a lot of people have agents, a lot of people don't. Tell us why we need an agent.
I'm not going to say you need one. You need an agent if you want to get into places that you can't get into. Obviously, you need an agent. You need an agent if your genre is one that requires an agent. Okay. Some genres don't need an agent. If you're writing stories that, if you just say, look, I love the digital market, I love my Kindle, I want to live over there, you don't need an agent for that. You need an agent if you're like, I need somebody to be more of a developmental coach while we're working. I need an agent for that. I need somebody who can navigate that system, the publishing world for me, so I can focus on the writing of it more than anything else, because that's a piece that a lot of people struggle with, right? That they have a hard time separating the business side and the writing side. Okay. I had an author who just recently was really struggling with the communication between her and her editor. The communication was just kind of a little wonky, right? So she was thankful she had that agent. She was thankful that she had me there because she could kind of talk to me. I could kind of coach her how to word things when she was talking to the editor to make sure that everything was all in alignment, because I knew where the editor was going. I knew where she was going. They were both heading in the right direction, but they were talking differently. Does that make some sense? So I was able to guide her that direction. You need an agent if you want to do more than single book contracts. Okay. Again, with this particular author, they were only going to try to do like one book at a time on a contract. It was like, no, we want 6 books. We want a 6-book deal. And I was like, well, we can go to a 5. Great, we'll take a 5. So now she's all set up for a 5-book contract, which was awesome because she needed the agent to kind of navigate that for her. Okay. Bronwyn Scott is one of my authors, right? We just got her a 10-book deal. Okay. 10-book deal. Why? Because we were able to craft and polish a contract for her in such a way that the editors listened to her differently than if she was just trying to push it on her own. Right? The agent piece, it's always the good cop, bad cop point of view. Right? That's what you always want to think about. It's my job to take care of the ugliness of the business. It's your job to take care of the happily ever after in the creative writing side. If you're doing great by yourself and you know the world great, then go for it. I mean, I offered a contract to an author and she said, no, I think I want to stick and run out and do this on my own. And you know something, she's doing great. She's doing awesome. And I cheer her on all the time whenever I see her and we talk and things like that. She really didn't need one. She's functioning fine the way she's going. And that's okay. So I guess that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
So if you contract with an author, you have an expectation of what, 3 books a year? Is that what you said?
Well, in the romance genre, you should be producing easily 3 books a year, 3 to 4 books a year, because it's name recognition, right? If you think about when you go to a bookstore, okay, or if you're on your social media and you go, oh my gosh, take a look at this, the new Bronwyn Scott novel's coming out, Rand, and like you'll go hit buy. Like, I'll be very honest, I've already bought the Stanley Tucci book. That's not due out until Monday. I've already bought that book because I'm already expecting it to be good. Now, I don't know if it is or it isn't, but I trust Stanley. I follow him all the time. I trust Stanley. But I don't know if it's good or not, but it's name recognition, right? That's what we see. You will always go grab the book that you see in that name, right? If that person only writes 1 book a year, you're going to forget about that person. So that's why, especially like Harlequin in particular, Thule does this as well. They'll sit there and go, I want back-to-back books, June, July, August. Because if I can get you hooked on one, waiting until the July book comes out, you will likely go back and find some back reads of that person and keep reading. But if you're waiting 1 whole year, my daughter's just really upset because her favorite read right now, the next book doesn't come out until 2025, and she's just screaming. Like, she's like, I can't wait that long. So yeah, it's name recognition more than anything else. I mean, that's why politics work. That's why they put all those signs out, because you're going to go into that voting booth, you're going to pull out that ballot, and you're going to vote for the name that you've seen the most, whether or not you even read that book or not, whether you read the voter's pamphlet. Mine's sitting right here on my desk. So, you might not have read that, but, if you don't read that book, you're going to vote for the name. Yeah, I've seen that name before.
Thank you. That's very interesting. That's very helpful too.
So Maggie, I think I hit the end of my time here. if I'm looking at my clock correctly.
Well, thank you very much. It's been great. Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
what I would encourage all of you to do though, is if you've got a question or something, because the odds are as soon as I wave and we all do our Zoom wave bye-byes, like we all do anymore, once we do our Zoom waves, the odds are you're going to click that and you go, oh shoot, I forgot. I wanted to ask Scott a question. What I would definitely want you to do is to email me and just say, hey, listen, I was in your workshop. I got a quick question for you. I try to get back to everybody, especially those. I'll try to get back to everybody as fast as possible. Depends on kind of where I'm at in terms of my reading and things like that. So that's kind of where we're at. It's a sunny day today over here in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to rain on Monday. So I'm taking advantage of this good weather and I'm walking the dogs here. So
Well, thank you for giving us your time. It's
yeah, definitely.
really wonderful. I just
Yeah,
have a
and,
really quick question. So your daughter lives in Florida. If you ever came
Yep.
to Florida, would you come to see us in person and we could pitch to you in person?
Yeah. Well, see that because that was my original plan. Actually, before she, actually, it was before we even knew she was going to be moving down there. We were just saying, hey, I got an idea. What we'll do is we'll rendezvous. We were going to go to Disney World, and I said we'll go to Disney World, and then after Disney World, I'll just cruise on up and meet with you guys.
Okay, maybe next year, Leah.
Yeah, no,
Be
she's
great.
down in Wellington is where she's at right now. So
Mhm.
We would
she's
love
in
to have
Wellington.
Pardon?
Yep.
yes, in December are still open, and we may have some others, but we would love to have you.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, so just let me know. Let me know, and we can certainly see what we can do. And even if you're just kind of, I know I had a chapter. There were 2 chapters in like one in Kansas City and one in Missouri, and they knew that they didn't have the funds enough to do, one get together. So they kind of pooled everything together, and I did like a full day workshop with them and everything like that. And they just kind of said, let's just pool it all and go that direction. So yeah.
We haven't done that yet. That sounds interesting.
Mhm.
It does. Mhm.
You just find a couple other chapters in that area and find a local spot and then you kind of get a larger, more interaction with each other instead of just, in a closed system right now where a lot of the chapters, that's what they're in. They're in this closed system. They're only talking to each other and not getting out and not connecting with anybody beyond their little vacuumed areas. So.
Mhm. Okay, well, that sounds good.
Okay, well, listen, I
Gotcha.
will let you guys close out your meeting and everything. And like I said, feel free to email me, let me know, and we'll see where we can go from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Talk to you. Bye-bye. Yeah, see, I
Bye.
told you, there went the Zoom waves right there. Okay. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
Maggie, that was great. I'm
Yeah,
glad-
very good. Thanks for booking him.
Yeah,
Yes, thank
Wonderful.
you.